Imagine a digital empire so completely dominant, it practically was the internet. Before algorithms curated our feeds, before our social profiles basically defined who we are, there was just this one absolute giant at the very peak of the connected world. It was literally the front door to the World Wide Web. And for a minute there, it seemed totally invincible. So, how does an empire that has literally every conceivable advantage just collapse into absolute nothingness? Let's get right into the story of unparalleled scale and just spectacular failure. $125 billion. Okay, to really wrap our heads around the gravity of this collapse, we kind of have to grasp just how stark the financial reality was back in the year 2000. At its absolute peak, this single website had a market cap worth more than General Motors, Boeing, and Disney combined. I mean, think about that. They employed over 10,000 people across this massive, sprawling campus out in Sunnyvale, California. It really wasn't just a tech company. It was the absolute cultural center of gravity for the whole digital age.
To see how we even got there, we just need to quickly trace their insane ascent. It all started back in 1994, really just as a hobby. Two Stanford PhD students, Jerry Yang and David Philo, were basically just trying to organize their favorite websites. They built this hand-curated list they affectionately called Jerry and David's Guide to the World Wide Web. And man, their timing was impeccable. By 1996, they launched an explosive IPO where their stock actually doubled on the very first day. Fast forward to 2000, and they're sitting at a peak of 125 million active users. They were officially the front door of the internet. That company, as you probably guessed, was Yahoo. The name itself is actually allegedly an acronym for yet another hierarchically organized oracle. And, well, an oracle is exactly what they were to a whole generation of early web surfers. You have to remember, the internet back then was just absolute chaos. Millions of random pages, no map whatsoever. Yahoo acted as the ultimate librarians for this digital Wild West, organizing the web completely by hand, category by category. The sheer power they wielded was just unprecedented. Seriously, just getting featured on their iconic purple and white homepage sent such a massive tidal wave of traffic, it would literally crash your servers overnight.
But as we see so often, absolute dominance breeds absolute arrogance. In the year 2000, Yahoo made its first truly fatal mistake. This tiny, totally unknown startup approached them with a better, faster, much cleaner search engine, and they offered to sell it to Yahoo for a mere $1 million. And Yahoo's executives literally laughed them right out of the room. I mean, why on earth would they need better search, right? They were Yahoo. People came to them no matter what the underlying technology was. Well, that tiny, dismissed startup, that was Google.
Now, instantly contrast that arrogant rejection with what happened next. Just 5 years later, Google soared to this breathtaking $150 billion valuation. Yahoo refusing to part with $1 million in 2000, and then, their hesitation to buy Google for a few billion a couple years after that, it marks what is very likely the most expensive no in the entire history of modern business.
So the really crucial thing to understand here is that Yahoo's eventual death wasn't some sudden explosion. It was this slow, agonizing demise brought on by a massive identity crisis. They just simply didn't know what they were. Were they a media company, a technology company, a web portal, an ad platform? They desperately tried to be absolutely everything to everyone, and because of that, they mastered absolutely nothing. This deep internal confusion fueled a crazy revolving door of leadership. I mean, the company churned through 6 different CEOs in just 11 years.
And while they were completely trapped in all this internal chaos, constantly reorganizing and shifting their vision, they were entirely missing the future. They basically stood paralyzed while their rivals stole every major technological wave right out from under them. Facebook claimed social networking, Apple dominated mobile, Amazon conquered commerce. The culture inside Yahoo just rotted from within, to the point where their brightest engineers were literally fleeing to the very competitors that were actively putting them out of business.
Which brings us to a really brilliantly humiliating paradox. Yahoo's single greatest move, their one saving grace, actually had absolutely nothing to do with their core business. Back in 2005, they made this highly criticized $1 billion early investment in a scrappy little Chinese e-commerce company called Alibaba. Well, when Alibaba went public in 2014, Yahoo's stake was suddenly worth over $40 billion. For years, those Alibaba shares were worth way more than the entire rest of Yahoo combined. It essentially reduced the former king of the internet into nothing more than a holding company for a Chinese investment. Desperate to fix this rotting core, Yahoo made one final, really aggressive push in 2012. They brought in Marissa Mayer, a brilliant former Google star, and the whole tech world watched closely as she spent over $2 billion just trying to make the brand cool again, most famously dropping $1.1 billion on Tumblr. But the underlying rot was just way too deep. Tumblr withered, their revenues flatlined, and all these flashy acquisitions completely failed to ever coalesce into any sort of coherent, unified strategy.
Then came the ultimate, just devastating blow. In 2016, a horrific disclosure sent absolute shockwaves through the industry. 3 billion user accounts had been hacked. 3 billion. It still remains the largest data breach in history. And what's even worse, Yahoo actually knew about it for 2 full years before publicly disclosing it. That fact completely and permanently shattered whatever tiny shred of public trust they had left.
Now, to fully grasp the real tragedy of this whole story, we have to flash back to 2008 for a second. Microsoft actually threw Yahoo a massive lifeline. They offered a staggering $44.6 billion, which was a 62% premium at the time, to buy the company. It was literally the perfect escape hatch. But Yahoo's board, led by founder Jerry Yang, arrogantly rejected the deal. They insisted that Microsoft's billions massively undervalued the company. Okay, let's slam home the brutal consequence of that hubris. Just $4.48 billion. That was the grim reality of 2017 when Verizon finally purchased the shattered remains of Yahoo's core business. They sold for exactly 1/10 of what Microsoft had offered a mere decade prior. Just an absolute total evaporation of wealth and legacy. And that perfectly encapsulates the core thesis of their downfall. The fatal lesson of Yahoo is the extreme danger of confusing popularity with being irreplaceable. Look, they had every advantage you could ever possibly ask for. The money, the traffic, the unparalleled brand recognition. They could have bought Google, they could have merged with Microsoft, but instead, they just rested on their laurels. They stood completely still, seemingly unable to even imagine a future where they didn't matter, while the rest of the world just raced right past them.
The company that once organized the entire World Wide Web couldn't even organize itself, leaving us to wonder, which of today's untouchable tech giants is already writing their own Yahoo story?